Hey everybody, and thank you so much for watching my Halloween videos. Now that October's over and we're in November, I thought I'd go back and talk about one of the movies that directly inspired the last movie I talked about. The Maltese Falcon. Now, The Maltese Falcon came out in 1941, was directed by John Huston, which I don't know if that was his first movie, but it was definitely one of the earliest. And John Huston gone on to make many, many more films, some of them quite popular, but this really was the movie that put him on the map. It was kind of his big break. He was untested. And The Maltese Falcon is an adaptation of a story from the same name written by Dashiell Hammett. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And Hammett was a pulp detective fiction writer for Black Mask magazine way back in the 20s. And the characters that Hammett wrote about in those magazines seem commonplace tropes today, but they were very different from other detective stories and detective archetypes of the day, which at that time it was basically someone like Sherlock Holmes or the Thin Man, these very upper crust, sophisticated gentlemen. It was more a battle of wits and less seedy alleyways and gunfights and looking through keyholes. And it's the latter type of detective that Hammett wrote about with the character of Sam Spade. And I don't know why, but until recently I never put it together that Sam Spade was a pulp detective character from the days before the Maltese Falcon movie. But looking back, it's so obvious because just the name Sam Spade has pulp detective written all over it. But funny enough, this is actually the third attempt that Warner Brothers made at adapting the Maltese Falcon. And I gotta say, the third time's the charm. The first two didn't have that rugged grittiness that this movie and the film noir genre in general is known for, and that comes directly from Hammett's writing. Hammett's writing is the blueprint for what would come to be known as the film noir genre. All the tropes, the anti-hero vibes that a lot of these detectives give off come directly from his writing and his contemporaries. I don't think it was all him, but he was definitely a big part in that. And the greatest thing that this movie did is take what was already in the writing and just put it on screen, and it completely changed how movies looked and felt and how people talked. And if you just want any proof of how influential this movie was, again, Seven, which I talked about last week, borrows a lot of tropes and style from this movie in particular. Although I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention Citizen Kane's influence too, and I'll get around to Citizen Kane someday. And I'll be completely honest, I don't love Citizen Kane like I love the Maltese Falcon, so in my opinion, I think the Maltese Falcon is better. But to be fair, Citizen Kane was a huge movie when it came out. It also has a very striking visual style that is technically film noir, and it really was the 1-2 punch of the Maltese Falcon plus Citizen Kane. They both came out in 1941. That started the whole film noir movement, because after these movies, a lot of studios jumped on board. A lot of filmmakers just loved the dramatic lighting, the darker stories, the unlikable heroes. And I gotta say, as far as genres go, film noir is one of my favorite, if not my favorite style, because it just looks so cool, especially in black and white. But now let's talk about our main character, Sam Spade himself, played by Humphrey Bogart. And the first time we see him, he is your classic Hollywood film noir detective. And for me, it's really hard to think about Humphrey Bogart as not being a big name, but he was really a nobody when this movie was made. He was a contract player at Warner Brothers. He usually played bit parts or villains. He was never a leading man. I mean, look at him. He's not the most attractive looking guy. He's kind of short. So for a long time, the only parts he could get were the villains until this movie comes along. And Sam Spade is a fascinating character because he walks that moral gray area that people kind of take for granted today, because this is Code era Hollywood. This is Hays Code in effect, and somehow they were still able to get away with film noir stories while still keeping it all ages appropriate. So because of that, they couldn't really get into all the details and explicit scandalous activities. For instance, I'm pretty sure in the original story, it's made clear that Sam Spade sleeps around, or at least had slept around, with his partner's wife. So yeah, the movie doesn't really explicitly say that. And I really do believe that the Hays Code, in its kind of backwards way, improved the filmmaking techniques of Hollywood to get this information across without explicitly just saying it or showing it. You had to get a little bit more creative. There was some double talk, there was some innuendo. You had to really pay attention to what's going on to get the meat of it. So yeah, if you haven't guessed by now, Sam Spade, not the most altruistic guy. He definitely has his flaws. And he plays it as a world weary, beaten down, I've seen it all, seasoned detective. But his partner, on the other hand, Miles Archer, you know, the dude that he's secretly having an affair with the wife of, and who you might recognize as the district attorney from Miracle on 34th Street. I think that's so so funny because he's so likable here, but he plays such a great villain in Miracle on 34th Street too. So it's just weird to see him in this role. But he's the younger, more energetic one. When Mary Astor walks in for the first time playing the mysterious Bridget O'Shaughnessy among other aliases, she goes through at least like 3 different names throughout the course of this movie. So I'm just going to call her Miss O'Shaughnessy because I don't have time to go into all of it. But when she shows up and she gives this sob story, he volunteers wholeheartedly to go and check out her story. He tells the guy that she mentions, Thursby, and before you know it, he's shot dead. So Spade and Archer sadly is no more. And that's really what gets this movie going. It's the death of Miles Archer. I know everybody likes to talk about the Falcon and what a MacGuffin it is. And it is the thing that everybody seems to be after. It drives the plot forward when there's a lull. But really, that's not what gets the plot going initially. Initially, it's the very first scene when O'Shaughnessy walks through their office and they take her on, only for the very next scene, Miles to be shot dead by who we don't know. But now Sam Spade is on the case because his partner just died and he's not exactly taking it well. Well, he's taking it like Humphrey Bogart would take it. You know, this stoic man's man, doesn't show emotion. He's just going to get to the bottom of it, remain completely objective. But one thing I have to say about Humphrey Bogart in this movie, and I see it more and more when I really look closely at what he's doing in these roles, he delivers the dialogue in such a hard-boiled, monotone, emotionless way. But then he looks at the camera, looks at his co-star, and he's got these big puppy dog eyes where you know that the dude is hurting inside, that he doesn't like to be this kind of person, but that's just all he knows how to be. It's what he thinks his place is in society, so he doesn't really have a choice. But the way he plays it with his eyes is so telling because in order for us to get behind Humphrey Bogart, we have to like him. We have to sympathize with him. And if he's a man that actually hates the terrible things that he does, that he actually sees his own flaws and is disgusted by them, well, that's a person who's not just a monster, he's a monster with a soul that we can actually get behind. But before Sam can really do anything about the first body, another body shows up, and it's Thursby, the guy that Archer was tailing. So he calls up Miss O'Shaughnessy again, trying to get some answers. She doesn't really give answers. And Mary Astor in this movie plays the femme fatale so well. Sometimes probably a little too well. I don't know, I never really bought into the schoolgirl act that she tries to put on throughout about half of the runtime of this movie. She tries to lie and she tries to be this soft, frightened creature that needs protecting, that needs help, and she doesn't know what to do. But really, she knows exactly what to do. She's got plans. She's a schemer just like everybody else in this movie. She's got an agenda. And that's the part I believe. I 100% buy that she is this conniving woman, that she's greedy beyond belief, and that she will go to any means necessary to get this Falcon. But when characters like Sam Spade or some of the others are like, wow, you're really good and you're very convincing at being the innocent, I don't know, for me that part doesn't really sell, which I guess isn't a big deal because you're not really supposed to buy it either, because the other characters don't. Sam Spade certainly doesn't, and you're kind of looking at everything through his eyes. Now we have yet another character in the mix, and this is Joel Cairo, played by Peter Lorre. And Peter Lorre is just a great actor. I love it every time he shows up in a movie because he's got that very distinct voice and he plays desperate so well. I love it when Peter Lorre gets desperate, be it in Casablanca or in the Maltese Falcon. Whenever he's like panicked and he doesn't know what to do and his eyes get really big and his hair starts moving. And Joel Cairo is this other interested party in the Falcon. I guess now's a good time to talk about what the Maltese Falcon even is. And basically it's a bird, it's a statue, maybe about this big, and it's black, but underneath it's supposed to be made of gold with all these jewels and rubies and precious stones, precious metals. It's this incredibly valuable statue that was made many, many years ago by Crusaders to the King of Spain, but it never got to the King of Spain, and has just kind of been kicked around from place to place for around about 1,000 years. But for those who are in the know and have been following this and been tracking it, which if you've seen any kind of treasure hunting show on the History Channel, you know just how deep some of this lore goes and the type of people who are super committed to finding lost treasures. And Miss O'Shaughnessy and Joel Cairo are two of them. And Joel comes into Sam's office one day asking about it. Actually offers Sam Spade quite a bit of money to help acquire this item. And just to be on the safe side, he holds Sam Spade up at gunpoint to search the office to make sure the Falcon isn't there already, which you can imagine doesn't thrill Sam Spade being stuck up in his own office. So he quickly disarms and knocks out Cairo. And in a moment that always makes me laugh, when Joel is unconscious on the couch and Sam's going through his stuff, he actually wakes up. And when he wakes up, Sam's got the gun and is like, okay, you're going to kind of explain a little bit more to me. And they discuss terms and there's a little bit more open communication. And once you think that, okay, now they're on the same team, he gives the gun back to Joel and right away, he sticks him up again. He's like, I gotta search your office anyway. But there is still one more interested party who's after this Falcon, and Sam is kind of in a whirlwind of all these people right now. He doesn't really know who to trust. He knows that O'Shaughnessy hasn't been completely honest, so he can't really trust her. He definitely knows that Joe Cairo can't be trusted, because just look at him. He's the picture of sleazy arrogance. But then we learn that there's a third person involved, and that is Casper Gutman, played by Sidney Greenstreet, and he is just the physical embodiment of that name. He is massive, and if you've seen Sidney Greenstreet in anything like Casablanca, he's another perfect case of this cast all working off of each other. And if you do want to know more about Casablanca, I have a whole video about that. And I think I already said this in that video, but I still stand by it. Sidney Greenstreet, to me, is the perfect Kingpin from Spider-Man. You know, just big, bulky crime lord, super wealthy, super arrogant. He just has this confidence that nobody can touch him, no matter what he does. And he is also after the Falcon, but he seems to know a lot more about the Falcon, and it's through these scenes between Humphrey Bogart and Sidney Greenstreet where we actually get the full story of the Falcon and all the backstory and everything that I already explained to you. So now all the characters are moving into place, and the movie hits its peak for me during the climax where we have everybody just in a room together and they talk. And they're all after the same thing. They're all super competitive people. All three of them are trying to get a one-up on each other. The only person who really couldn't care less about the outcome is Sam Spade. He's just watching it knowing that he's going to get paid no matter what. He's going to be compensated no matter who gets it. But it's mostly just morbid curiosity at this point, just to see how this all shakes out, because it's only a matter of time before the Falcon arrives. It's being shipped over here across the ocean as they speak, so they know it's coming, and they just kind of have to sit it out, sweat it out. Pretty simple. At least it would be if there also wasn't a police investigation going on, because don't forget, there are 2 dead people already, and that has not been answered. If anything, it's been made even more confusing because their number of suspects has just grown, and the police are just completely lost. The one thing that they do know is that Sam Spade knows something, and he's not sharing with the rest of the class, and that frustrates them to no end. So much so that they actually bring him before the DA, played by Perry White from the George Reeves Superman show. I was not expecting that. But he basically tells Spade, like, listen, if you just cut a deal with us, if you let us in, if you just tell us who did it, if it was you, you'll get a fair deal. If you were implicated in any way, we'll figure something out. They are so desperate for a lead, and all Bogart does is laugh, because he knows that they are nowhere close to figuring it out, and the best thing he can do is just to keep on doing what he's doing, and eventually it'll all sort itself out. But this does put some added pressure when all the group is together and they're all just kind of sweating it out. They realize that they have to give the police a fall guy. Somebody has to take the heat for all of this insanity, because even when the Falcon arrives, the police are still going to be knocking on everybody's door trying to figure out who killed these 2 men. So somebody has to take the heat for it. And the way everybody sees it, the best options are either Cairo, which obviously Cairo objects to, this O'Shaughnessy, which obviously she objects to that, or Wilma, who I haven't really talked about in this video because he's not a big player. He's not this interested party. He's just a hired gun. He's some kid that Gutman hired to be his personal bodyguard. He's been following and keeping an eye on our other characters throughout most of the runtime, which Spade just has no time for, and he takes every opportunity to embarrass this kid, humiliate him, get him thrown out of the hotel lobby for acting suspicious, which he was. And slowly but surely, everyone realized that if they do turn on Wilma, that is their best bet for satisfying the police and everybody just making it out unscathed. But before they can really act on that, the Falcon arrives. It's here. We get to see it finally. Everybody's opening it up and you see the greed in their eyes. And the bird looks exactly like it was described to look, you know, just covered in black enamel. And I'm pretty sure it was Sidney Greenstreet that's like, okay, we gotta test it. So he takes a knife and he starts hacking at the enamel, trying to unveil a ruby or sapphire or a piece of gold or something to let them know that this is the original, real Maltese Falcon. And spoiler alert, for a movie that came out in 1941, which was many, many years ago, so I don't feel like I'm really spoiling anything. It's not the real Maltese Falcon, it's just a hunk of lead shaped like a falcon with some black enamel on it, and everybody is so disappointed. And that's really what I love about this movie, because it shows just how fruitless greed really is. No matter how much you want to acquire, there's always something else out of your reach. And that is everything that this whole movie built up to. It's this big letdown moment. Everybody feels it, but in the hearts of Joel Cairo and the Fat Man, and especially Wilma, greed does prevail because they book it out of there. They are on the hunt. They're going to look for the real one. They're going to go back to whatever Far Eastern country that this came from, and they're going to find the original owner and they're going to hunt it down all over again. At least that's what they think, because during all this sweating out, Sam was trying to put all the pieces together, who killed who and who's responsible for all the shenanigans that went down. And it turns out that Wilma actually did shoot Thursby, and he shot the captain of the ship that also died. So our body count's up to 3 now. So as soon as they leave, he picks up the phone, calls the cops, and says, hey, your 3 suspects are trying to skip town. Catch them before they get away, because they definitely killed Thursby and the captain. And while we don't actually see them get picked up, it's pretty clear that, yeah, that's settled. But there is still one more question. Who killed Miles Archer, his partner? And that honor goes to Miss O'Shaughnessy. And the scene where Humphrey Bogart has to debate with her as to whether or not he's going to turn her into is one of the best scenes in the entire movie, maybe even in the entire film noir genre, because he really does lay it out as, on the one hand, and on the other hand, and he just weighs the options. And on top of that, his own moral code of doing something, catching the person that killed his partner, he just can't compromise, no matter how pretty she is, or how much she claims to love him, or how much he feels like he loves her. His code prevails, and he does turn her in. And that's really where the movie ends. It's not really a happy ending. Film noir films don't tend to have happy endings anyway, but it is still, I would say, a triumphant ending. He did get the murderers in the end. Everybody who's guilty will face justice, even if that justice doesn't exactly align with traditional Hollywood film tropes, where the leading man gets the leading lady in the end and they live happily ever after. That doesn't happen here. By the end of this movie, Sam Spade has no partner. He has no love interest. Even Archer's widow, he doesn't really seem to have any interest in, so that's kind of gone. He's just left alone with only a secretary to keep him company, and whatever the next case may be. And that is The Maltese Falcon. This is one of my favorite movies ever. It's why I love the film noir genre. And for me, it's always a toss-up between Maltese Falcon and Casablanca. And while both are technically film noir and they have a lot of those tropes, this for me is the quintessential film noir film. If you're only ever going to watch one film noir, watch this. It's got all the tropes, all the cliches, at a time when the cliches weren't even cliches yet. And if you watch this, you can see why it's been replicated so many times. Everything that could be seen as a cliche or a trope just works for the story's benefit, because that's the kind of movie it is. It's the story that needs to be film noir. When they've tried to adapt it in the past in other styles, it hasn't worked. And it's because the grittiness, the ruggedness, the black and white, the extreme lighting, the German expressionist influence, all works to create that atmosphere and tone that Hammett's original writing so perfectly displayed. But now I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about The Maltese Falcon? Have you seen it? What do you think about it? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby. This is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.